Ciao everyone and welcome to episode 19 of Voices of Italy Beyond la Dolce Vita. Today's episode is a contemplative one. As you might know, Italy just had a national referendum last week involving 5 different laws and proposals for changing them. And surprise, surprise, the referendum was invalid due to low turnout. If you follow Voices of Italy on Instagram, you might have also noticed my stories the next day. Let's just say that I didn't take it well. And that spiral of thoughts is the same that I always have at the aftermath of a national vote here in Italy because it really just feels like things go always the same way. And this time the issues were serious, but not only that, they were involving all of us. The minorities that rarely have this kind of attention, but also the rest of us. And still, we didn't show up. So, what's really going on? Why do we keep ghosting elections and votes like that? And what does it say about us as Italians? In today's episode, we're doing the commentary of an ongoing fight that sees Italy fighting itself most of the times. We get in the ring, we talk big, we circle around the problem, and then we punch ourselves in the face. Welcome to the after commentary of yet another round of Italy versus Italy. Italy is one of the most iconic countries in the world. But what does Italy mean to the world? What does it mean to you?
Buongiorno.
Pizza.
Ciao Bella.
Michelangelo.
Spaghetti.
Mafia.
Dolce Vita.
My name is Alessia, I'm Italian, and this is Voices of Italy, the podcast that peels back the layers of the Instagram perfect Italy to reveal everyday stories of authentic, surprising, and messy Italian life. I want to start this episode with a heartfelt grazie to all of you who've been around, sharing, posting, listening, connecting. The community of this podcast is growing and it's honestly really amazing. I've been having more and more chances to get to know a lot of you, and I can't believe this is happening in my life. You really have made my day more times than I can count. Every time you send a message, leave a comment, recommend an episode, or share your perspective with me. So thank you so much to all of you. But coming back to our episode, I can explain this metaphor, this fight metaphor that is probably not very much like me. My very American boyfriend, I'm saying this, I realize very stereotypical way, but you will forgive me. While we were talking about the referendum outcome, suggested something along the lines of, why don't you do an episode where you break down what happened, like some sort of post-match commentary? And then he literally showed me the commentary of a fight that was doing that before and after the fight kind of discussion. At first I laughed, but then I realized that it's kind of perfect and it makes sense for what I want to tell you this week. In the last episode of Voices of Italy with our lovely Davide, aka Eurosys in Italy, we talked about, among the other things, the referendum, and we were already kind of predicted the likelihood that it wouldn't reach the quorum, that not enough people would have been participating in the vote. And here we are, we were right, it didn't happen. I really think this is something that kind of felt like another lost fight between Italy and Italians, or, well, Italians versus themselves, I want to say. And the result, as usual, is another KO. We didn't even fight very hard in the sense that there was this whole usual pessimistic aura around it again, no matter how, already being able to present a referendum usually means that there is actually a community of people actively interested in that topic, because in order to be able to have a referendum, not only you need to collect, I think it's 500,000 signatures of Italians interested in that topic and in favor of having that referendum. But then the proposal and the signatures, they all get examined and assessed and possibly rejected from the legal system. So it's really not granted that a referendum attempt even reaches the end and actually makes it. So this is, as I was saying, however, everyone around me was telling me that they would love for certain things, at least some of those topics that were part of the referendum, to go somewhere that things could actually change, but that they are sure not enough people are gonna go. And I know this person that always says that they're not gonna vote, and it's the same every time. So this is just something that everybody was expecting. Again, for example, recently I was discussing this with a couple of my dearest friends, and we were saying exactly this. We were discussing in particular the citizenship issue that was part of the referendum, that basically was proposing to reduce the residence requirement to get the citizenship from 10 to 5 years. And so definitely was not granting citizenship to anyone. It was just reducing this amount of years that anyway end up being way more than 5 years unless you're rich, famous, or in a particularly favorable position. And these two friends of mine were saying that they have respectively a brother and mother that never go to vote. They openly say it, they just don't do it. And it was funny also because the mother of one of my friends and the brother of the other friend, they're two completely different people, two completely different kind of samples of Italy today. We're talking about a middle-aged woman and a young man with, I think he says that his brother is a lawyer, or at least he has a law degree. So two completely different target, but they were both fixated on that position, and sort of both for the same reason, because they didn't believe that there was any chance that them making the effort of going to express their vote could ever change anything, or for a reason or the other, maybe because not enough of other people were go to vote, or even if they do, even if we make it, even if enough people go to vote and all of us we vote for changing the laws, then it's not guaranteed, and that's true, it's not guaranteed that the government will take actions to actually follow up on those results. It's usually a very strong show of what the people want, but there have been cases in the past in Italy of referendums that miraculously reached the quorum. Enough people went to vote. The threshold is more than 50% of the population that has the right to vote. And still, even if the quorum was reached and there was a majority voting for a change, the change didn't necessarily happen, or I'm not exactly honestly what the legal parameters are in this case, but that's some sort of expression of the people's will, but it's not a clear direction, at least in this case of what's called the referendum abrogativo. So a referendum that is supposed to eliminate a certain piece of law. And this time around, the stakes were pretty high. They're not high. I mean, again, in my perspective, for so many people to actually manage to get people together and have this community-driven effort for a proposal, it's usually something pretty important for the community, of course, or for at least part of the community. But this time in particular, it was really touching certain aspects of certain issues, I should say, that are usually very popular, pretty much on top of people's minds when it comes to, even things that can make me change the party that I want to vote for. Majority of the issues, there were 5 in total, and majority of them were related to labor law. And then there was, of course, the citizenship one. And in particular, if there's one issue that really is on the news all the time, that is one of those things that everybody in Italy moans and complains about, that is considered one of the main issues of people leaving massively Italy to work in other countries, is again one of those topics always on top of the agendas, that, or at least in appearance of our politicians' agenda, they're always there under our nose, that in Italian we call precariato. A translation in English, I think, could be precariousness. So technically, that's kind of the translation, but I guess in Italy, We use it really, really commonly in everyday language to refer to the unstable, exhausting condition of living from short-term contracts to short-term contracts. So to really never feel like you're stable. This is at least what we think of it, because in my experience, for example, it's definitely not a problem that is perceived in a country like the United States, but over there is definitely easier for a company to fire their own employees than it is in Italy. Laws here definitely make it more difficult to legally fire your employee. However, we have a lot more of this feeling of instability, and we attribute it mainly to that. I think it might be partially related to this myth of posto fisso, of this, permanent kind of job that, I mean, beyond the fact that, it's a permanent job in the sense of its own contract terms, it's something that we usually mean, with a kind of a negative connotation, almost implying that there's nothing that anybody can do to fire you from that job. Like, that contract gives it to you forever. And that's sort of the ambition, at least that a couple of generations ago, but maybe also the generation before mine definitely kind of absorbed as the main goal, the most desirable outcome for your life. And the reason why I'm talking about precariato is because one of the referendum issues was the fixed term contract, or to be specific, was the referendum was essentially proposing to eliminate a few laws that rule the possibility to start fixed term contracts and the conditions to start those contracts, and was proposing to introduce as a mandatory legal step the obligation for companies that want to have a fixed term contract to justify that fixed term contract. Why are you hiring somebody for 6 months or a year instead of setting up a permanent contract with a trial period? The reason why this is a very popular kind of topic, something on top of people's minds, and that we attribute such a big importance in our job market, is because in Italy, unfortunately, companies tend to abuse essentially of fixed term contracts and even of internship contracts that in some cases are so common that essentially people go from an internship to another for years, even when they are well in their 30s, for example. And that's really not a strange situation. If you want to hear a little more about this, it's a topic that we have extensively talked about in episode 7 with a couple of voices from the street as well. So you can go and listen up to that one to get a little more of the feeling why this is considered such a big problem, such a big scar in today's society in Italy. So, this being something so important and so close to what actually makes us mad about Italy, I thought it could actually drive people to vote, even though they might not be interested in any of the other questions. And particularly, I'm referring to the one about citizenship, because clearly it's one of those topics that is definitely depending on a little bit your ideology. I get it, and clearly I was in favor of the yes to change the current requirement for citizenship. But the problem there was that probably there's not just a lack of interest in a specific topic, it's really a lack of interest in uh, changing things, a lack of interest in whoever is doing something to change it. It's like it's someone else's business a lot of times, because I would have understood this kind of result, like a 30% of voters, like it was in this case, if the citizenship issue was the only one on the table. But in addition to the one about fixed term contracts, there were 3 more issues, and they were all related to the rules around firing people in small companies, illegitimate firing and in general protection for employees. So in general, they were really all related to this labor market that we have, that really I challenge you to come here in Italy and find somebody that is happy about how things are from that point of view. So to make a long story short, out of 5 questions, only one was related to the citizenship, but obviously because of how much more Instagram friendly of a topic that is, it kind of absorbed a little bit the other 4 questions in terms of popularity out there. So I don't know, maybe in some people's minds that was the central kind of issue, but I really don't think in this case that I can justify the result, the outcome of the referendum with people didn't know. We live in an era where honestly boomers don't even have an excuse. Probably Italian boomers spend more time on social media than younger generations do. So there's no way that people didn't know that this was happening, that there were 5 questions. It's really, I guess, one of those things that really show how much people care. And if there's something that I've been really hearing my entire life is that us Italians, we have this sort of resignation. Things are the way they are, and we don't even talk too much about how they could change or think about it too much. We just sort of assume there's not a lot of hope for anything to go much better. Don't know to this day if this is some sort of passivity or if a lot of people maybe even interpret it as a form of protest, like I'm not going, nothing is gonna change. And so from their point of view, you're not doing something useful, I guess, but I really cannot comprehend that position. So honestly, again, it just feels like there's this general resignation. The sad thing is to see it in younger generations as well, because I guess maybe you could find the logic behind it in older people. My boyfriend even once told me that Italy tends to make you pessimistic. Even if you move here as an adult, if you stay long enough, you kind of absorb that pessimism and that sense that nothing really works, so why bother, And I get it. I get it. He kind of got the nail on the head with this, honestly, because that's definitely something I interpret it as lack of hope. This voting thing, I think, represents a little bit of that. Nobody's really taking this away from us. Like we have the right to vote. The rules are still there, and we behave as if mathematics didn't exist. Guys, if enough people go to vote, there's not much to do. A change is going to happen because no matter how, there's going to have to be something happen, even if not directly in the direction that we want it to go, that your community, your group, your party, whatever, want it to go. Something is going to have to move because that's how communities work. It's not a matter of, being hopeless. It's really just when there's a big group for pushing for something to happen, eventually something happens. But immobility, that stagnation is what gives us that illusion that that's just not going to happen, that we're too stuck and we can't move that much anymore. So I've been thinking to the reasons why is this happening. I think it's something that obviously it's complicated to explain from a sociological and political point of view, especially because a lot of western countries are experiencing this problem, especially the wealthy ones. It's like we're already in a kind of good enough situation that we are all kind of losing the drive to make an effort and go change something, because at the end of the day, even if in a country that we are unhappy with in a lot of ways, baseline, we're fine. At least that's why how I explain it in my mind, because definitely this is not an exclusively Italian problem. The decline in the participation to the vote is common to a lot of Western countries. But again, in Italy, definitely the decline is stronger than in other countries by a lot. So I've been thinking about the reasons, and I've come to believe that one of the reasons must have something to do with how us Italians do not engage politically because we don't trust authority, not even when we're asked to use it ourselves, in the sense of taking responsibility, driving a situation. I really think that fascism left a deep scar on Italy from this point of view. And even we tend to associate authority and other concepts like patriotism with abuse, corruption, oppression, overuse of power. That's, I think, kind of the relationship that Italians tend to have with authority. So we avoid it, we mock it, we stay neutral to stay safe. But in doing that, we've also made ourselves powerless, essentially. Authority in itself, it's supposed to be neutral, but I think we definitely have a negative connotation with that concept. I think we tend to think that it's just the same thing, that there's no good version of that. And but again, leadership is something that, regardless of your ideology, regardless if you're conservative or if you're a liberal, you need to have some authority there. You need to be a leader. You need to have a leader, and you need someone that puts people together. And that's just politics. I get it. I think mistrust for politics is definitely, again, not another particularly Italian thing. It's definitely a universal kind of thing in our societies. Definitely, we don't have that kind of good leadership kind of expectation. We assume that leadership is negative and that the best you can do is just stay out of it. It is what it is, and you're gonna find, your little ways around it. That's why Italian lifestyle also involves a lot of that trickery a little bit. You kind of need to have the right connections, the tricks, the way of doing things in a way that maybe they're not exactly supposed to be that way, but it's very common still to do it that way because it's just a simplified kind of route to the process. And that's kind of the way we live a lot of things. But this is just a problem because a strong leader doesn't mean an authoritarian leader. It just means someone that can lead to a change, because you're not gonna move masses of people by kindly whispering in the wind, or just by talking over and over with people that already think like you. I think that's definitely something that it's unbalanced in Italy, at least right now. We have the more conservative side of the spectrum that definitely found that leader in Giorgia Meloni, because no matter what you think about her, she's a leader, and she wouldn't be where she is if she didn't have that kind of talent. And everywhere else, every other side, every other political party definitely lacks someone like that. And that's why they are constantly at a loss, and they can't manage to regroup around anything, basically, no matter how small the issue, no matter how irrelevant. And I mean, that definitely explains why we have all these governments. We have had so many different governments ruling because they never reached the end of their term, and there's this really lack of the ability of just stabilizing a group, stabilizing the situation. But that's a direct consequences of what I was saying before. We are afraid of kind of having a strong leader because it makes us think of the worst case scenario, but not going for that strong of a leader leader usually causes a lot of instability. And I'm not gonna lie, in this case, with Giorgia Meloni on top of the government as a prime minister, it feels like there's more stability, at least from a political point of view, because clearly she's been able to kind of gather that stability around her, at least. And that's definitely not granted. And in this case, though, it's a particularly positive thing for Italy, given that instability, it's something that is happening in other big countries in Europe as well, at least from a political point of view. So we almost look like the stable ones in this context this time around. From the outside, I think at least our European neighbor tend to think about us as this very messy, loud kind of nation. From a political point of view as well, I was surprised to hear from different colleagues of mine that they had this knowledge in their minds that Italians never get to go to vote. I was like talking with this Austrian colleague of mine, and I was like, "What do you mean?" And he had this knowledge, this notion that Italians have all these governments but never go to vote, never get to go to vote because there are laws that kind of just recreate new governments without requiring a new vote. And that's actually kind of true. It happened a lot of times. It's called the reimpasto, like literally re-putting together the winning parties and recreate another government. That happened several times, and it's really not uncommon in Italy. I was just surprised to learn that something that is so typically Italian, so kind of complicated if you want, was known abroad. And I thought of how it makes us look, how this might reflect. And again, it's probably something that more other European people would know because of simply we have a closer relationship from a political point of view. And I know, this episode might sound like I'm moaning a lot, which is really funny because so far I've been telling you so much about how Italians complain, but then maybe they don't do enough to do something about the things that they moan about. And I guess that's a little bit of what I'm doing here, but this is Voices of Italy, and it's the most authentic Italian content that you can find out there. So I guess I'm being consistent with my Italian self here. We always say, even in TV, you can hear phrases like lamentarsi è lo sport nazionale. Complaining, moaning is Italy's national sport because really we associate that as Italians to ourselves, to the moaning, to the complaining in the sense of blabbing around negatively about something. And there's kind of that implication that if there's something to be done, you're not going to do it though, still, even though you're complaining. And I'm not saying all these things to get Italians to be judged. I really think that it should get people to think why Italians think that way. And it always creates this kind of a contrast and paradox between what's the Italy that people normally know out there and these feelings that we have. It's kind of we have a beautiful portrait of ourselves, and then back home, we are disillusioned and unhappy in all these things. Seeing the beautiful, picture perfect Italy that is out there in internet content, social media, in people's mind, in movies. It's beautiful to see, but sometimes I have that feeling that takes sort of the attention away from how Italians really feel. It's really difficult for me to explain why sometimes that's kind of annoying to me. And if I had to explain it to you, I would give you this example that is not really related to the cliches about Italians abroad. It's more of a national thing, but I think it delivers the idea. As you probably know, if you know Italian culture or if you know Italian society a little bit, you know that there's really a big gap between North and South Italy, unfortunately, in many aspects from economical point of view, from a quality of life point of view. Really, it's a very complicated sociological kind of situation. And there is this sort of internal stereotype that sometimes Italians have that whatever the problems are in South Italy, you know, the poverty, the job market, the crime, everything, it's kind of compensated in a way by the fact that we have beautiful views, beautiful sea, great food, and we have this welcoming spirit, and we have this really friendly way in our personality. And there was this woman from North Italy, and there was a conversation about the problems affecting South Italy. And to make a long story short, this woman was trying to say that people from South Italy don't really mind those problems because they're really chill and they really relax and they embrace life as it is. So if that situation is there, it's because they're happy with it, and we shouldn't judge them for it. They're happy already. They're so relaxed. They're so nice, you know. And I think when I heard that, I found that deeply insulting. I found that really maybe a little bit unwillingly, of course. Like, I don't think this person was trying to say something purposely insulting. What I mean is that having that idea that an entire population is like permanently laughing, having aperitivo, eating delicious food, and turning that into the personality of an entire population, and makes me feel a little bit like you're treating me like I am this silly monkey that is happy eating a banana on the beach even when the forest behind is on fire. It makes me feel a little bit like that. And the same feeling I have when I see, all this content, even from content creators that are supposed to be representing Italian culture, is full of cliches and stereotype and always represents this picture perfect Italy. Obviously depends on the context. I can't really generalize in absolute, but a lot of times it's too much. A lot of times it really takes away from what Italy really is and makes people think of an Italy that at times doesn't even exist, and sometimes makes even Italians kind of get trapped in kind of that picture perfect version of us. I think it encapsulates us a little bit in a box that doesn't help us. And I wish there was more true out there. I wish there was more authentic content about Italy, and that's why I'm so passionate about this project and about Voices of Italy. I would like to thank you, all of you, again for sticking around and for listening to this episode. I would love to hear your thoughts, regardless if you're Italian and what's your perspective, or if you're an expat living here, how did you live the situation, or if you're just an external observer that is looking and listening to all this. I would love to hear what you think. You can send me a message on Instagram at Voices of Italy. Let's turn this into a conversation. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you in the next episode.